Hi and welcome to another Photoshop tutorial. This is Steve, and in this video we're going to learn how to do a drop shadow. This is one of those things that is pretty simple but makes a really big difference in your visuals. And for this example I'm going to be showing you how to do this drop shadow with your text. And I'm sure you already know this, but a drop shadow is basically just this little shadow that kind of drops down underneath your image or your text. It's mostly used with text, but you could use it with an image or an object placed in here as well. So to demonstrate this, I'm going to start a completely new image. So I'm going to select off of this and go Control N. And it doesn't really matter what you do. I just have this like basically high resolution 1080p shape here, custom. You could also go with just the default Photoshop size. And we'll just click Create. So that just gives us a blank canvas with a blank background or a white background. And first we're going to put some text on here. So you hit the T key to get the text tool. And one thing to keep in mind is you don't necessarily want to click and drag in this instance with the text tool because it makes it harder to center it, because that constrains your shape. So the best thing to do is just to click with your text tool. And I'm just going to hit center so this is easier to see. I have this huge, it's at 713 pixels. You can change the size as much as you want, but we'll just do this. And I'm just going to say drop. Whoops, not drip. Drip drop. And hit enter or the check mark up here. And then to center this, you can say Control A to select all. And then you need to be on your move tool. So you hit the letter V, and it gives you these centering options here. You can also click and drag and move it where you want it to be. I think in the example I had it centered a little higher, but you can also use these. So this one centers it vertically, this one centers it horizontally. But I think visually I like it higher, so I'm going to just raise it up about like that. So that gives us our text. We can hit Control D to deselect it. And now we're going to put some effects on there. And the way you do that is you click on this layer and then you double click with the left mouse button. And this brings up your layer styles. You can also find this under Layer and Layer Style. Okay, so once we're in here, we're going to go to Drop Shadow, and sometimes that is at the bottom of the screen here, so you have to scroll down, or you can hit this one here and it'll give you the option as well. But we're going to go back up to here and you just click on this and it will put a checkbox by it and it will bring up all of your controls for the drop shadow. Now this is already pretty much set up to have it how I had it in the example because it will usually keep your defaults, but I'll show you kind of how to change that. For starters, you have your mode. You basically want this blend mode to be on normal. You have your color here. You could change your shadow to a different color if you wanted. You could go, dark. That's just something you could totally play around with depending on how subtle or extreme you want it to be. I'm going to click cancel and stick with black. You have your opacity. And so if you go lighter on the opacity, it's going to be a lighter shadow. If you go darker, all the way dark, it's going to be just really dark and intense. So you'd want to go, and this is all personal preference. You generally want to go subtle. I made this one pretty intense just so you could see it, But you want to usually be a little more subtle, so maybe we'd be in here. Your angle is which direction the light appears to be coming. So if your angle is up in this corner, then that means the sun is coming from, or the light is coming from that direction. And so your shadows extend off to the bottom right. And that's really important because if I flip this up like this, like the light's coming from the bottom, you can see how strange it looks. But that may be appropriate for certain effects. But usually you're going to have it kind of up and from an angle. Your distance shows how far away it is. So, and actually, if you go way big, then it makes it look like it's really hovering off the ground, and if you go really small, then it gives you a nice little subtle one. Spread is basically how like diffused it's going to be. So if I go all the way up to 100%, you see the edges are solid. But it's sort of like the softness on your brush. If I go all the way down, then it's going to be really soft. So we go somewhere subtle like that, and then the size is the actual, how big it is basically. So if we go way up here and then we adjust the spread like that, you'll see it's just ridiculous, right? But we'll go back down to a smaller size, somewhere like that. A little more solid. Okay, and then your contour, you can mess around with that, but that just kind of creates like weird effects. So this is the default. I usually keep it on that. And then noise will just like pixelate it basically. Not really pixelate it, but kind of make it broken up. So I usually leave that down as well. And that's it. You can just really play with all of those different little controls to tweak it the way that you want it. And then while we're at it, because this is how the example looked, let me go ahead and put some beveling on the letters. So what I did for that was I just click on Bevel and Emboss. And this is kind of like, a lot of these are kind of similar tools to change. So one of the main things though, inner bevel will bevel it inside the edges. Outer bevel will bevel it to the outside of the edges. I'll make this deeper so you can see better. So that's outer bevel, inner bevel, moves it to the inside. Emboss like raises it up, makes it kind of look raised up. I don't even use these very often. Emboss is fun, and then these are the ones that you'll use the most to change it. So the size changes how large the bevel or emboss is going to be, and then soften basically like kind of fades it. So you can do something like that, and then you have the technique too, which is you can do hard edges, you can do chisel soft, that one's a little weird, or just smooth. And you can play with the angles and things like that too. You can change with the opacity, that'll be like how dark or light it is, or how transparent it is. On the highlights, so the highlights get really dark and actually go away at 0, and the highlights get really bright when you go up to like 80 or 100%. And then same with the shadow. You can kind of fade out the shadow and just have highlights, or you can have a really intense shadow like that. So we'll keep those kind of in the middle, and then you click OK, and there you go. And then again, to make this match this one a little bit more, you can see I did the bevel a little differently, but that's okay. But to kind of get you that same background, what you would do is go to the background layer, unlock it, double click on it to do a layer style on it, and then we do a gradient overlay. And there are some that you could just pick from. Yeah, right here. So these, if I scroll up, you have your basic gradients, which are like these, and then you have, these are just colors that are pre-existing. So I think I selected one of these, probably a darker one. Oh yeah, you can mess with your opacity too. If you go all the way up with your opacity, then you get the full effect of the gradient. So I'll go back to these, and well, it was a subtle one, probably that one, something like that. That gives you your gradient. Let's see if I got anywhere close. Oh, and and you can also reverse the gradient. So I'll double click on this, and you go. So right now this is a radial gradient, which means it's a circle, and the dark starts in the center and then it goes out to light. But that's kind of weird looking. So what you do is then click reverse, and then you get the lighter part on the inside. Click OK. And there is your lettering with your drop shadow and all that other stuff that wasn't supposed to be part of the tutorial, but there it is. But that's how you do a drop shadow. And while we're at it, embossing, beveling, and gradients. I hope that was helpful. If it was, click like or subscribe, and I will see you in another lecture soon. Have a photo-rific day. Keep dropping the shadows. Okay, I'm gonna go now.